Hi, Emily. We're very, very happy to have you here with us today. Curtis and I collaborated on a project with the Center for Excellence in Learning Teaching, the Office of Social Innovation, and the Urban Water Research Center. We're very pleased to have you talk to us today about your project and specifically the curriculum project that you were involved with. Let's start out. First question, tell us a little bit about yourself, what course you participated in, and a little bit about your project.
Sure, thank you. Super happy to be here. Thank you for having me. So my name is Emily. I'm a fourth-year student in the Environmental and Urban Sustainability degree program at X University. So I took my course that I did this project in was Geo 555, Colonial Infrastructures in North America. So this project was meant to be kind of an expose, I think kind of similar to like journaling reporting, in that we had the freedom to kind of choose any project that would kind of illustrate settler colonialism and colonialist projects. So our job was to sort of investigate about the history, about who was involved, how it affected the local Indigenous community or communities, and the culmination of the project. So what ended up happening, that kind of thing.
That's great. It sets us off to understand some of the learning that you did that Curtis will be speaking about.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm thinking, you had a chance to really dive deep. Well, actually, maybe tell us a little bit specifically about like some of what you uncovered and what you learned in your particular project.
Sure. So I chose to do my project on the 1492 land back movement. So I thought it would be a perfect opportunity to research more about something that is, for me, fairly local. And a major contributor, I think, to the land back movement. This was an interesting project, I think, because it kicked off the 1492 land back movement that has been gaining more and more traction and attention, I think I'd argue, from like a larger settler community. I think it really helps illustrate that these land claim arguments are the same arguments that have been happening since 1492, since settlers arrived in North America or Turtle Island, and it's the same arguments, and particularly from the colonial governments involved, whether it's the federal, the Canadian government, whether it's a provincial government, whether we're talking about the United States, the same sort of fight over sovereignty, using military, using the army, using policing, using these various structures to kind of quell revolts or arguments against it. So I mean, these have been happening for hundreds of years, and this is just kind of the like a great example of this continued fight over generations.
Emily, let me ask you a question. You're doing, obviously, like you really did an in-depth dive into the Haldeman Tract and land claims. Was there an overlap with kind of the First Nations water crisis as well? Did you have a chance to make some of those connections?
It wasn't a focus of my paper, but certainly my reading. I mean, a lot of I think they're always inherently intertwined. I think whenever you're talking about either extractive industries or development industries, I mean, in essence, you're destroying the land for something, right? Whether you're taking the resources or you're just destroying them to build something, you're inherently demolishing the ecosystems there, the local ecosystems, and certainly adjacent ones. So clear cutting to make space for it sort of results in changing over time the characteristics of the soil and water. You have a lot of refuse and dumping, toxic chemicals that are used. And so all of this ends up affecting the water supply. I guess depending on the project and the ecosystem, either sooner or later, all of this kind of leaches out to local communities and surrounding communities. And because of the nature of the interconnected nature of ecosystems, the pollution starts to spread farther and farther. And it ends up collecting in certain, in larger reservoirs. And so communities that depend on local water or depend on the animals who are living in these ecosystems, it all ends up being poisoned. There's a toxic effect that builds up that eventually will accumulate in bodies, in people who rely on these systems.
Actually, that's a great lead up to the next question. I really like how you made the links between the past and the present and the impacts of colonialism that continue, and those practices, institutional practices and systemic practices that still affect us today and affect communities today. I wanted to just make a link to what you just said about it's all interconnected. And you named a few disciplines, in fact, in terms of how the effects trickle down to all of those areas. So you had a learning forum that you participated in, and with students from the other 3 courses that participated in the project. We wanted to know, what do you think was some of your takeaways, especially in terms of that interdisciplinary collaboration and seeing multiple perspectives?
It was really a pleasure to hear the different projects presented, and from the point of view of like engineers, for example, they're talking about the material needed and how like proper construction is hindered by so many like governmental bureaucratic type of nonsense that really prohibits some more simple fixes, right? I think the collaboration between various disciplines is absolutely necessary. I think the knowledge has to be shared, because you have to consider it's not just environmental damage, and it's not just structural damage. I think these specialties and these disciplines and this knowledge have to be able to be freely utilized and provided to Indigenous communities under their direction, in a spirit of like reconciliation, if you will. I think the knowledge is there to help solve a lot of these problems, but I think the really first thing, the most necessary, immediate thing we need to, I think, focus on and pay more attention to and put more emphasis on is getting away from this idea that like the Canadian government or the Ontario government or whoever white savior complex needs to be really understood and taken apart. It's absolutely vital that the direction needs to come from Indigenous communities, and that we need to listen to that. We need to be humble enough to understand that we can help as long as they want the help and they're asking for it, and we provide the particular help that they're asking for, and not beyond that, not what we think they need. Kind of a long-winded answer. But...
No, it's great. It's great. I can really tell that you've developed a pretty sophisticated understanding of these issues in Professor Spice's class, and I'm sure in your research. Are you, when you think about, you signed up for a geography course, and it was a geography course in Indigenous, in colonial infrastructures and studying colonial infrastructures, and then you end up at a learning forum with all these different courses. What do you think is the real value of of having a chance to take your course and connect it to the other courses that were at the learning forum?
I mean, I think with anything, it's the chance to learn. I think having the ability to, in the forum where there is having the particular focus of like Indigenous water crisis, but having people from different disciplines, I think it allows the opportunity to find meaningful solutions that address a number of problems, to make sure that, or at least understand problems from more than a very like narrow perspective. The more students who can offer their perspective from their particular discipline, I think helps their, each is like another piece of the puzzle.
That was a great way to get us to the final question. And in fact, I feel like you've answered a lot of it. Our final question was going to be about what do you think is important for other students and others to know about Indigenous water issues and interdisciplinary collaboration. I know you mentioned the importance of keeping in mind and deconstructing the white savior complex, for example, in how we address solutions or how we address communities that we're working with. Would you like to add anything else to what you think would be important as future lessons for others working and looking at these issues, and also working in a collaborative and interdisciplinary way? From my perspective,
from some things that I've learned through my studies and my reading, I think there are a lot of myths and untruths, if you will, that go around about Indigenous peoples and communities and nations. So, I mean, like water crises is one particular focus that really is really necessary to address. For what my 2 cents is worth, I think it should be taught in every course in some respect. Like I think, I think colonial history needs to be taught truthfully and transparently. It's present in every facet of our life. So I think the fact that I know like the university is making more of an effort to hire more Indigenous professors and offer more Indigenous-led and focused courses. But I really think there needs to be a mandatory component about colonial history. And the course that I took for this project, the GEO 555, could be one of those courses. That's a great answer. It brings in all of the different elements that you've talked about in summary, but also shows the role that we can play, especially with students and starting from the education system about a lot of these issues. So thank you for that. Emily, this was wonderful. Thank you. I agree with Curtis. Like, I just want to echo what Curtis was saying. You've put in so much into knowing the historical pieces that bring us and inform today, but also thinking about your role in that interdisciplinary collaboration. Feels like you really gave it a lot of reflection. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us. Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure. Because I mean, like I said, it's one thing to do, to do an essay or a project or whatever, and do a good job on it. But I don't think, speaking just generally, I think it's a lot more meaningful for students to get to the historical sort of foundational knowledge to really appreciate a lot of these topics that are present today, right? Yes. They won't have the same meaning or the same value without understanding the generational challenges they face. So,
well, thanks, Emily. We really appreciate this, and it's been great talking with you.
My pleasure. Nice to see you again. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much, Emily.